Well, hello, SLAE family. We have the long awaited and well worth it amazing guest, Lisa Pierce, with us today. I am so excited for you. Lisa has been through more obstacles and hurdles than anyone I've ever met and has come out a complete champion. Wait till you hear her story. And what I'm going to encourage you to do is not only listen with awe and respect, as I have every time she talks, but look for those little nuggets of mindset in how she truly was able to transform her life and where you would expect somebody would end up coming out of her circumstances and where she is. Totally an amazing story. So Lisa, first and foremost, welcome and congratulations on being a newlywed.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really, I was really glad and excited to do this.
I'm thrilled to have you here. So I wanted to start off and just share with everyone a little bit about your background. Now, we're from Baltimore, so we know what the projects are. If you're not from Baltimore, the projects is where you don't want to grow up in Baltimore City. And Lisa, God bless her, grew up in the projects, was in an abusive home. And then when she finally got to a court hearing about some of the things going on in her home, was actually abandoned at the courthouse. Unbelievable. So Lisa, can you share with everybody that childhood, the impact and mindset and what that did for you? Because ultimately it did put you into the foster system. So
yeah,
a few minutes and talk about that.
Sure. So, grew up in the projects. We lived in multiple project developments and, God rest my mom's soul, but everybody that gives birth may not be groomed to be a mother. All different types of species give birth, and so, but giving birth and raising children are two very different things. And in the grand scheme of things, I just kind of look at it as my mom, never embraced motherhood. Because when you embrace motherhood, one of the cardinal rules is you have to protect your children.
Yes.
And you have to believe your children, even when there's doubt. Because the seed that gets planted when you don't believe your children is that your children, if you tell your mother the truth and your mother does not believe you, that starts an erosion of your confidence.
Yes.
And when you have an erosion of your confidence and self-esteem, that creates an environment for bad behavior. And so, so we lived in a house where my mom herself had very low self-esteem because she just craved a man. She didn't care if he worked. She didn't care if he, cleaned, she just needed validation to say that she had a man. And it's interesting because women, in the 50s and 60s and the 70s, it was something that you were married. No matter if the guy was a jerk, it was just something that validated women to be married. And so she came home one day and she said, I'm married. And we had never seen this man ever in our lives. And, our peaceful childhood turned into a house of horrors. And so, but eventually, Don Shula, the former coach of the Miami Dolphins, said, failure is not the end and success is not permanent. So if my stepfather thought that, that he was getting away with doing these terrible things to us, eventually it was exposed. And that's how we landed in a courthouse, the Mitchell Courthouse. And, the courts looked at abuse as a medical and social condition versus now where they look at it as a crime. And so the courts, the courts were working with her, and every time she came back to court, they were trying to customize the, what the recovery should look like. And the judges in the state and the prosecutors were like, no, you're not doing enough because, she was taking her guidance from him. And of course, if somebody is doing something, whether it's wrong or right, but it's what they love doing, they're going to position themselves so they can keep doing it. And so when, when she realized that the court system was not playing with her, he talked her into going out when the court went into recess, and they never came back. And so,
Lisa, it is mind-blowing to me, first of all, not to protect your child, and I'm not saying anything about
yeah,
I don't mean to go there at all, but just as a parent, but then to leave your children, I like the amount of emotional and psychological damage that would do to a normal non-Lisa Pierce person, I will say, is unbelievable, that what you have accomplished in life coming out of just that alone. Now, I know that, God always has a plan, and you actually had a great experience in the foster system, correct?
Yeah. So children only know that things are wrong or things are bad when they kind of have something to compare and contrast. So we never really, the abuse was so egregious and it was so embedded into our daily lives that we just thought that that's how everyone lived. And I'll never forget when we went into the group home and they gave us sheets, and we didn't know what to do with it because we didn't grow up on beds with sheets. We didn't grow up with pillows. That was almost like a fantasy to us. And so, but, in a way, it was kind of good that we were so young, because number one, bullying was not around, people said, oh no, this is how you do it, right? So people became so helpful. And so remember, his job was to keep us isolated. So we never felt, anything wrong because we got to see people. So, it didn't really resonate with us that we were in a bad situation until we aged out of foster care. But yes, we had an amazing foster care experience, and
your foster care mom was, kind and took care of you. And
yeah, she was a stay-at-home mom. She had 3 of her own biological daughters that lived in the house, but you could never tell the difference between us. If she bought them a dress, she bought us a dress. When we went to church as a family. I never forget, we went to a family reunion in North Carolina, and so her name was Fanny Jones. And so we were all Fanny's angels, all of us, And even when we run into each other now, we don't address each other as foster sisters. You're like, oh, they got my sister Lisa, they got my sister Pie, So, and so it was an amazing experience. And it's interesting that in 2021, foster care as a system still has some systemic problems when kids age out. Now, they certainly have more resources now, but it costs so much to house children.
Yeah.
So, and the cost is the level of training and education, the professionals in that child's life. It's very expensive. So there's not a lot of money for transitioning. And so that's why I actually do my workforce training program. So the foster care system, those students, they don't pay.
So when you have had the definition of a roller coaster life, like really down, and then you had a great experience in the foster system, and then you aged out of the foster system, and that did not work out well for you when you came out. You didn't have a place to go or career, or what did you have to learn or go through to survive that experience when you were pulled out of the environment you finally got into?
Well, the operative word that you said was survive. So when you age out of foster care and you have no resources, there was no job training, there was no, you are thrust into immediate poverty. So can you imagine the emotional?
No.
Because really, in all honesty, it's almost a grandioso side of rejection, right? You have this wonderful experience. It's almost like getting kicked out the Ritz-Carlton hotel.
Mm.
Like you had this beautiful weekend and now you lost your wallet, you don't have the money, right? And so you almost go into the twilight zone. But obviously you got to eat, you got to survive. And so you do things to survive, like shoplifting, right? And it's so necessary to have the penal system, but everybody that's breaking the law didn't start off as a criminal. They became that.
Yes.
Because conditions just continue to get worse.
So Lisa, it's interesting because coming up in October, actually, we have a guest who's going to speak who has founded a nonprofit specifically to address women coming out of the foster system because of what you're talking about. And, for you found yourself homeless and you were in poverty, and then you ended up becoming incarcerated as well, correct?
Yeah, because eventually, so shoplifting to eat, that's the behavior.
Yes.
And if you still haven't found a way to survive in a healthy way, your behavior just gets worse until eventually, somebody has to put the brakes on and you end up in a really tough situation. And, but as you get older, your anxiety and your self-loathing, that turns to anger because the disappointment of that anger is unresolved disappointment.
Mm.
Yeah, see, when you don't mitigate and reconcile disappointment, it needs somewhere to go. And so it lands in the anger bucket. And so once again, you're insecure, you don't trust anybody, everybody, is the boogeyman. And so you just find yourself almost in a wilderness trying to get out. And so the nail that sealed the coffin for me was that all of my bad behavior led to me losing my children. My children were taken from me. And your children being taken from you is the ultimate indictment of failure. And so it's interesting, when I was invited to the White House, the president learned about me, President Trump, and he had so much compassion for me. He said, Lisa, why didn't you give up? We would have understood. If we hear your story and somebody would have said, you made different decisions, we would understand. And I told him, I said, I didn't give up because I love my children just like you love your children. Oh. And that was the only kind of adhesive that was holding me together, that I wanted to make things right with my children.
So now you go through all of this and you have two great things that come into your life, God and a 5-year plan. So let's talk about the transition because, yes. And I mean, you would expect someone having been through half of what you're through to end up in a different place than where you are. Mm-hmm. So tell us about that. How did you transform? What did you do? What was your plan? How did you change your entire life to end up at the White House, among other things?
Well, I'm a political junkie. And in 2007, you started hearing these whispers about this senator in Illinois named Barack Obama. And, growing up as an African-American, it's just some things that you don't even think that'll happen in your lifetime. Yes. And so, but as the noise got louder, and like I said, I started paying attention to politics under President Clinton. Mm-hmm. And so, I just loved it. Like I just would watch all the shows and, but at one point, because I was a convicted felon, I couldn't vote. So I became like the cheerleader. And so then the laws started to change and loosen up. And so it was something that made me so proud to do once I got the privilege to do it. But in 2007, I just got so inspired. And I never forget when I was so engulfed. Now, I got saved. I found Christ in 2007. But what that does is that gives you the courage to look at every room in the house that's just tore up. And because sometimes it's painful to look at, but faith gave me courage to look at the house. And so on the election night, I said, you know what? This is crazy. I cannot believe that this might happen. And so the results for California hadn't come in yet. And I said, you know what? If this country does something that great, I'm gonna do something great for myself. And I woke up the next day, I called my pastor, and she was like asking me, is it true? And I was asking her if it was true. And so, we just started, it was just, and I always said that if I ever got to meet President Obama, that I would thank him, because I know I'm not the only one that got inspired by him. And when I was named Entrepreneur of the Year in 2017 by the Greater Baltimore Urban League, Valerie Jarrett was the keynote speaker. And I told her, and she said, I'm gonna tell him that story. And but I'll meet him probably one day. But at any rate, my faith gave me the courage to look at how terrible the house was. And so I said, well, how am I gonna accomplish this? I've dug myself in such a deep hole. And so the laundry list was long. I had to do everything from repair my own self-esteem and self-worth. I had to repair my relationship with my children. What a lot of people don't know is that I was almost 400 pounds because food becomes your comfort. And so I already had a tremendous disadvantage because I couldn't find a job because there was no reentry programs, So I learned about a 5-year plan, and that, the best way to execute a 5-year plan is in 30-day intervals. Mm-hmm. And so when you are in a seismic hole, you say, okay, I'm not looking at the years, I'm not looking at the months. I'm looking at, there are 4 weeks in this month. What can I accomplish this week? What can I accomplish week 2? And you have to break it down into the lowest common denominator, because the work is enormous. It's a heavy lift.
Yes.
But when you execute a 5-year plan, you got to pepper it with small wins. You got to get early wins. So I was a person, I never would arrive to anything on time, but it was almost like a form of depression. And so getting anywhere on time was not a priority. And so I made for 1 week, and I couldn't even do it for a whole week. It's like, okay, I'm going to get to this appointment on time, this one day. And when you just break it down to the bone gristle, and I learned to celebrate myself. Like, if I got to an appointment on time, I was so terrible with time management that people would purposely tell me stuff that started like 2 hours later. Because I would get there on time. And it wasn't until somebody invited me to something, and it was supposed to start at 8:00, and they told me it started 6:00 in the morning. And I was there 6:00 in the morning, and I saw no wrong. I said, I think I'm a little early, and I'm gonna just go. It's a 7-Eleven not far, so I'm gonna just go get some coffee. Like, I was so dumbfounded to success because I never knew what it was like to get somewhere on early. So I thought events started at 6 a.m. And so, like I didn't, and the person was like apologizing to me. And I'm like, no, this is a victory, because that, like I said, and those small wins helps your train to keep moving.
And so with all of this, you end up getting a Bachelor of Science, a dual MBA,
Yeah.
and you become the Entrepreneur of the Year,
Mm-hmm.
and you get invited to the White House to sit in on a round table.
Yeah, a roundtable discussion on the state of women-owned business.
Amazing. So
yeah.
just, for someone who sees this, that has been through a lot and can't imagine that level of transformation, what did it feel like for you to walk into the White House and to be part of something that monstrous after watching politics for years and, coming out of everything you've done? That had to be overwhelming and so exciting.
Well, so it was life-changing because, and I'm not even talking about just the nostalgia of being in the Roosevelt Room in the Oval Office. And so they're very limited in who can take pictures with the president by themselves because they don't know what affiliation you are,
Sure.
But the president said, so I was there with 10 other women and I have a picture with the president by myself. And what people don't know is that the other women are on the other side watching. And so, and he literally said, no, let Lisa come. Lisa can take a picture. And so, but because by that time I had gone through great counseling and therapy, I started to feel that anything that was happening to me, I deserved it.
Yes.
Because I used to have this imposter syndrome because I was still holding on to the negative things. But when people started highlighting, like you said, wow, you got a dual MBA. You have an MBA by itself is hard enough. But to get an MBA from two of the top schools in the state, but nothing was given to me. And I had to reimagine a lot of things. I had to reimagine rejection. So I got rejected so much, I let it inspire me. So if I applied for jobs and they just kept turning me down, I had to get to a place because rejection will erode, and cause you to take a couple steps back. And so even now, I look at rejection like, I'm supposed to do something else with this. There's something else going on here. And so I take my mind off the rejection and put my mind on the solution. Fantastic. And so many people let rejection defeat them, and it's so interesting because God will send you exactly what you need.
Yes, he will.
Yeah. And God is not the author of pain or, sorrow or, but God will allow things to happen because he's really trying to prepare you for something. So when I'm deeply spiritual, so when I was diagnosed with the brain tumor, there's a protocol at the hospital that when you give a certain kind of diagnosis, it can't be just one doctor. So they have to send a team in to answer all your questions. And so when I got diagnosed, a team of doctors, I always tell people, it doesn't take somebody with 4 lab coats to tell you that take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. So when I saw 4 lab coats come in my room, I knew, I said, oh, this is not going to be good. And that's when they told me that they found a brain tumor. And so one of the things that struck them is how calm I was. And I said, well, I'm calm, because they said, wow, you're so calm. I said, because I need to listen. I said, if I spaz out and start running up and down the room, I said, first of all, I can't run.
Mm.
And so I said, but what'll happen is I won't hear what's next. And I said, I also listened. You said a lot of things, but you didn't say I was going to die. And so I learned in my life that even in bad news, you got to be intentional about finding a morsel of good news. So out of everything they told me, because my brain was swelling, and they said, well, we got to admit you right away. And, you know, and it's interesting because there's a lot of inequity in things,
Mhm.
inequality in things, but there's also some things that you can control. So my response to my doctor that diagnosed me was so powerful that he gave me his cell phone number. He said, I don't care if it's 3 o'clock in the morning. If you have a question, you text me. And even now, I periodically text him.
Do you really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because I got diagnosed at a LifeBridge property. And the president of LifeBridge is a good friend of mine, Neil Meltzer.
Okay.
And when I told him that I was diagnosed by Dr. Riddleman, he said, yeah, he's the head of our stroke unit. And, you know, it just, and this is when you know people care about you.
Mm-hmm.
He said to me, he said, Lisa, I don't even feel confident operating on you. Now, he's the head of neurology at LifeBridge. He said, I went to school with a gentleman that works over at Hopkins. He is not accepting any new patients, but he's my friend. And I'm going to ask him as a favor if he would take your case. And so I tell my students, you can accomplish more by being nice, compassionate, vulnerable, you know, because it was, you know, because my students think bullying is the way to success. No, if he operated on me, he felt that I may have had lasting, you know, so this particular neurologist was almost like a celebrity neurologist. So Jane Miller from WBAL, he was her neurologist. And so she had this brain tumor similar to mine. And so he actually paired me with her.
Did he really?
And because the complications were just unbelievable, because we've all had a nightmare before, but there's something called a night terror. And because they had to do so much work trying to get to the brain, it just disrupts so many of your sensors. And so, because my husband, when we were dating, you know, we were dating back then, he said, why do you all keep checking her heart? You know, she had a craniotomy, she had a brain surgery, but you all just keep sending her for EKGs. And they said, oh, because the night terrors could give her a heart attack if her heart is not strong enough. Because you know how you have that dream that you're falling?
Yes.
A night terror, you actually hit the ground and you feel it.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah. So it's like where you wake up screaming, where you smell the train smoke that you are standing in front of a train. And so because they know that because just them going inside and moving stuff out the way, they're disrupting nature. They're disrupting what your body naturally does. And that causes all kind of stuff. And then, you know, some people even have to be put what they call medically incompetent, because you can have dreams of killing people. And that's just how, now, thank God I didn't get to that point.
Well,
But I never forget when I called Jay Miller and she just was laughing at me. She said, "You having those dreams, aren't you?"
yeah.
Because at one point he was like, "It's time for me to get some support for you."
Well,
And so, and so that's why when COVID came, I was like, "Man, please, you don't know what I just overcame."
Lisa, I think that honestly, God has had a plan for you
Yeah,
before you had a relationship with him. And
yeah,
I really love everything you've been through. You have championed through, and now you have a career which is about helping and empowering other people who are coming out of tough situations. And before we wrap up, because I could talk to you for 3 days and like it'd be fabulous. I
right.
want to take a minute and have you just share that you now run a masterclass on the
Yeah,
fundamentals of business. Lisa, who came out of all that and now has sat in
yeah,
a round table, is teaching people.
yeah,
Can you
yeah,
share a
yeah.
little about what your class provides
Hmm.
and who you're trying to help in these?
Hmm. So much of your pain and anguish that you go through
Mhm.
plays a big role in business success. Rejection,
There you go.
rejection, rejection is one of the hardest things about business, but it's all in your perspective. So if somebody sells cupcakes and they don't sell cupcakes for 2 days,
Mhm.
if you're not, if you don't have a rejection acumen, meaning you need to learn what rejection really is.
Yes.
If you look at rejection as failure, you're not going to be successful at business. So I have 3 business degrees. I have a business, I have a bachelor's of science in business management, and I have a master's in business from Towson University and a master's in business from the University of Baltimore. The reason why my business is so successful, the education played a role, but it was my response to rejection that made me fearless. I'm not scared of too much of anything.
Geez, what could you be scared at, Lisa?
And
You've
so, right. So if I, you know,
through.
yeah, so I lost a $250,000 contract before. And I just got up the next day and just wrote for another one. Now, that might sound devastating, and it was, but once again, once you have a relationship with rejection, you understand rejection. And so instead of looking at it like, "Oh my God, I botched that, I messed it up," I looked at it like, well, if the $250,000 contract was in me, there's another one inside of me. And I've done it twice since then. So one of the things I teach in my masterclass is how fear is a dream killer.
Mm.
And your failure to recognize rejection for what it is will kill your dreams. You know, I got approved to do training in 2 other states where I didn't know a soul. When I went to Pennsylvania, even the GPS couldn't help me. I was so lost. But once again, once I've experienced something, then I just say, "Oh, good. So now I know if I take that turn, it's going to twist me all in knots." So failure teaches you what to do and what not to do.
Yes, it does.
And so when I saw a post recently where somebody said, if you could take the challenges out your business and you have a clear path, what challenge would you take out your business? And I responded, no, the challenges is how you develop. How do you know that what you're doing is working if you don't fail at it? How are you going to know to fix it? If wearing polka dot pants with a striped top and polka dot hair beret, if I walk outside and I think that that's okay, if nobody tells me, did you get dressed in the dark? I'm just going to keep dressing like that, right?
Yes.
You need feedback.
This is a big example of empowering people. Just the example you are is amazing. So what I'd love to do is we will put a link to anyone who wants to enroll in your masterclass in the comment section. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you could, leave some comments for her and we'll make sure that she sees all of that. And if you happen to be watching this in the accompanying Facebook group, she's also in the private Facebook group. So if you're in that group, you can go ahead and message her. But Lisa, I cannot.
I enjoyed this so much.
You're amazing. Your bravery, your faith, your vulnerability, your honesty, the example you lead, and it's awesome that you got to the White House. God knows who knows what he's got planned for you, but it is going to be even bigger and better. So congratulations on your health and your marriage and having your kids back in your life and being a grandma and being entrepreneur of the year, and can't wait to see your next 5-year plan and where you end up. So much for being here.